Kevin, we're looking at 7Sage user Jan Lamb's analytics. Just for some context, for some background, this is a core subscriber, and they've been subscribed for not even a month. And the analytics that we're looking at, most of them, or is it all of them, come from imported? They imported? Yeah, all of them are taken on LawHub, so they're imported.
Yep. So the first thing I'll say is this is a pretty common beginner profile where they've studied for a couple of weeks, at least with 7Sage. They have a couple of exams taken in LawHub. And I think the most important thing I want to convey to this user is taking PTs is a bad idea right now. Not only is it going to be wasting valuable prep test content that you can use later once you have more experience with the test, but it's also not the best way to learn right now. And so on the first point, you'll notice that this user has taken what used to be the most recent PT up until today, PT 158 and 157, as well as the 140s, which are among the more recent prep tests. And it's not that big of a mistake to have taken these right now, but I think it would be far better to save these more recent prep tests for later on when you're more prepared, when you are gearing up to take the test. But if you're just in the beginning stages of studying, which this user appears to be in, I think it's much better to use the earlier PTs. And so, yeah, I think that's one mistake that I'm seeing from how this user has started off their studies. And then the second would be this user is taking a prep test, it looks like about once a week. But the problem with that is they're making so many mistakes right now on each prep test that there's a lot of value from just spending time reviewing those mistakes very, very thoroughly and going back to parts of the core curriculum to improve their understanding of the core concepts. I mean, it's possible that this user has not really made it through much of the core curriculum if they've just started. And so I would strongly recommend working through the core curriculum at their own pace, not trying to meet some artificial deadline like the January test or the February test, because this user has strong potential. You know, they're starting with 147, it looks like, which is just a very typical diagnostic. And this user can make large improvements, but they want to make sure that they have the right mindset, which is right now they are learning, they are gaining familiarity with different approaches to question types, to RC questions. They're getting a stronger understanding of the fundamentals like conditional reasoning, causal reasoning, and so on. And they're not really going to improve as fast as they'd like if they keep taking prep tests every single week without that strong foundation. So that's my observation from these analytics so far.
I agree with pretty much everything you just said. So just to revisit the bullet point of action items, first action item, stop taking PTs. When you do resume taking PTs, do it in the reverse order that you're doing it. You're burning up all the most recent PTs first. Do it the opposite way. Start burning up the older PTs, right? The lower number PTs. Work your way up to the more recent PTs. But that's even a secondary point. The first point is just stop taking PTs. You need to be drilling. You need to be reviewing lessons in the core curriculum. Kevin, if you click over to their drill analytics, you'll see that barely any drills, right? 63 questions drilled since.
Which makes sense because they just signed up a couple of weeks ago.
That's true. Yeah. So we can look at some, I think we can look at some prep test specific results. I noticed just from, PT 158 is a good one. I noticed that if you just filter to just main point questions, right? That's the foundational question type in logical reasoning for, where we start off teaching you about logical reasoning. We start with main point questions because that forms the basic building block of what an argument is can you extract the main point from an argument? And you'll notice here that this user gets the questions right, but look at how much time it takes, right? The question 1 is in section 2, question 1, main point question. The user went over time by a minute. right? In question 13, other main point question, user went over time by 50 seconds. So it's good that you got them right, but the amount of time that it's taking you to get these questions right reveals to me that you don't actually have a very solid grasp on the foundations of main point, on main point questions, right? These questions should be, they should just be, yeah, so this looks a lot better, right? This prep
Yeah.
test looks a lot better, right? This is what I want to see for main point questions. So get your timing variance down so that you're more consistent. Not only are you getting main point questions right, you're getting them right quick. How do you do that? I think the first thing you want to do is create a drill using only main point questions that you've already seen. I don't want you to burn any new main point questions, right? So on your drill builder, you can do that. Just filter for the questions you've already seen and filter to main point questions. So with that drill, go through it again and go through it quickly as you can, and start identifying patterns, because there are patterns to main point questions. One of the most common patterns in main point questions is they'll start out with somebody else saying X, Y, Z, and then the author says, yeah, but these people are wrong, right? And then they'll give their support. So learn to identify what I just said, this kind of generic pattern. Try to learn to identify that. That's how you can build that's how you can build speed.
Yeah, and we don't want to sound too harsh. It's quite normal and natural to take twice as long, maybe even longer, than the target time when you're first starting off. It's just that that's I think a clear sign of lack of familiarity. One of the difficult parts about studying, if the way you study is by taking a full prep test and then reviewing, is that there's just so many different types of problems. There's so many different stimulus patterns that if you wanted to get better at the kind of structure that JY was describing, it's just very difficult because, okay, that's one pattern to remember. There's going to be another one. I'm sure there's mistakes related to conditional reasoning here. There's mistakes related to maybe interpreting the word unless. There's mistakes related to overlooking or not noticing correlation to causation fallacy. And all of these are things you can definitely work on and improve. It's just, it's more difficult if you're trying to improve at everything at the same time. So that, I think, is another reason that just treating your studying in a more focused way is going to be more effective. Now, one way to do that is to go through the core curriculum. So I think if this user hasn't already gone through foundations, it would definitely help to go through foundations, especially arguments, grammar, conditional logic, intersecting sets, and formal logic flaws, depending on whether you like to get into that stuff right now. I think you can save that for later. Go through the modules in order, ideally. And if you want to get more drilling in between, we do have drills at the end of each module, but if you want to do more drilling, absolutely do more drilling. But that's going to be how to improve. I think it'll be best if Jan Lam doesn't take another prep test for maybe at least 3 weeks.
Yeah, I totally agree. And before you do the main point drill that I prescribed, I think it'd be a good idea to go through the logical reasoning unit and the main point, main conclusion module, and just go through the lessons, go through the U-tries, and then create that drill comprised of the main point questions that you've already seen, and try that again.
Yeah, I mean, I'm confident this user will get to where they want, but I think it's going to be faster if they study in the right way.
Yeah. Okay, so good luck.
Good luck.